The last video was pretty long, but I think this one is going to be short and cheery. First of all, let me just commit my changes to Git, because I forgot to do that. Why is this so difficult? I don't want to commit directory, I want to commit everything. There we go. Let's see, what is unversioned? Target selector, I don't know what that is. I'm going to ignore that, but I want enemy game, I want the player. I guess I've updated Gradle, so I think maybe that's why these have changed. I'm going to try adding them and see if I regret it later. So, added enemy, that's not how we spell. Commit that. And now we can continue without fear. Should not ignore the warnings. Let's just look at them real quick. I get a warning from the file that I did not create. Newer version of Android X Activity is available. Okay, interesting. But is that really... Let's go jump to source. That is interesting. Can I... It doesn't provide a quick fix, does it? Can I do something up here? Show quick fix. Thank you. Change to 1.2. Sync. I can do that now, right? Because I've already committed, so now I can just do all these changes and see if anything breaks, and if it does, I roll back. Right, so first warning is fixed. Let's go see. Unused import directive. Cool, we can clean those up. Both of them are gray, so I see they're gone. They're unused, sorry. Flip horizontal is never used. I'm good with that. I don't understand why that is a warning. And then custom view game overrides on touch event, but not perform click. I'm going to have to read up on that because I'm not sure if that's a problem. We'll check it out at some other time. Can we just build and see if everything works? Launching on device. Well, it compiled, and so the new library version seemed to be fine. Good. All right, more warnings later. Let's see. We wanted to do collision checking, and because we are geniuses, we have thought of this. In our base entity class, we have a free function called isColliding, so that's what we will use to check if things are colliding. This is going to happen in the update function after everything is moved. We're going to have to want to check collisions. Actually, I don't have to do that as a comment. I might as well just write the function call and then generate it. After checking collisions, we generally want to have some reactions to collisions. And in this case, we probably want to check for game over. That's going to be trivial at a first glance because we don't have anything to do when the game is over yet, but we'll get there. Alt-Enter to get suggestions, and in this case, I want to create the function check collisions. And then I want to Alt-Enter, create the function check game over. These macros are not great to leave around because they will throw an exception for you if you call these functions before you remove these. So I'm going to remove them. I don't need that exception. If your application is crashing, we had a case of this in the student forum, is why I mention it. Make sure when you run into problems like that, crashing errors, that you check your logcat, you check the output, because the app is talking to you and the Android system is talking to you. Make sure that you're listening. It's very easy to just forget about logcat or miss this because you're looking at the virtual device. But yeah, check your logs before anything. If we were to call check game over, I can show you actually, with this macro in place, it is being called, so we can just run this. The application ought to crash as soon as it starts, because that's what Kotlin does. So here we go. It crashes, disappears. Very weird. We go look at the logcat. Scroll down, scroll down, scroll down. And here we go. Fatal exception. And here's what happened. Not implemented error. An operation is not implemented or not yet implemented. And then it tells us exactly what line of code crashed us. So keep track of your logcat. It is tremendously helpful in troubleshooting. To be honest, I don't know why those macros needs to exist, but whatever. Maybe it's good to keep us on track so we don't forget about stuff we were supposed to do. Check collisions. What do we need to do? For each enemy, let's call it enemy, in enemies, right? We have a list of them. That's not the syntax. Yes, it is. For enemy in enemies. I'm going to copy this because apparently I cannot type. We can ask, is colliding? If is colliding. We ask if enemy and player is colliding. And if they are, we notify them. So we call enemy on collision. We pass in the player and we tell the player, you have an on collision with enemy. Or rather, this has just happened. This is the thing you've collided with. I don't believe that any of our classes is implementing this behavior. So what do we need to happen? We want the player probably to have health. Do we have health? We can go check. No, we don't. There is no health member. Okay, so we add that. We do a private var. Do I want it to be private? Probably. Let's call it health. We should set an initial value. And since I don't like hard coding gameplay values, I'm going to create a constant for it. So call that player starting health. Is that good? Probably not. If you think of a better term, pick a better term. But it's clear enough. So now we can do health equals player starting health, which is much clearer. It gives us a type, it gives us a scope, it gives us much more context than just the value 3. And at some point later, we could hand this to a developer and they could play around with the gameplay settings. How much health should we actually have? Now, we need to implement the method that is available in the base entity class. So let's see if Alt-Enter is going to do it. No. If I do Alt-Enter on this, no. If I right-click and do Generate, Alt-Insert, Override method, bring in on collision. Thank you. Now, we can do all kinds of stuff here, right? We are telling the player you're colliding with that entity. Cool. We could ask, what is that entity? Is that entity a bullet? Is it a power-up? Is it an enemy? And then we can act on that. We know right now that we are only colliding with enemies. So at this point, I'm just going to do health minus minus, and that's it. In the enemy, we want to do the same thing. It was Alt insert to override method from the base class, bring in on collision. And in this case, the enemy doesn't really need to keep track of health. For a quick and dirty demonstration, I'm just going to call, perfect, we have a respawn. I'm going to call respawn. So if we hit something, just respawn immediately. That's all that they will do in response to collisions. Cool, let's start the app and see if that works. I just launched it twice, I think. So we are going to have to tweak the size of these entities and our physics, because for there to be any gameplay here, we really need there to be a chance to dodge the enemies. We want to be able to avoid collisions. We don't want this dense amount of enemies, and I don't want them to be this big. And as you notice, the collision detection is kind of visibly off a little bit because we're doing rectangle intersection, and there's lots of transparency around these ships that the collision detection routine is not aware of. It's using the full width and height of the bitmap. That's fine. There, we could do a circle. That's often easier to do a bit tighter. Or we could have offsets on the rectangles so that we simply crop them a bit tighter. Because we don't need pixel perfect collision detection in this case. We just need something that isn't too visibly broken. Another option is also to just throw out the ships that break the most. So this long slim thing here is likely very visibly wrong when it comes to collisions. And so maybe I just remove that from the set. So I can't make enemies with that shape. This shape is far more robust, I think, with this basic collision detection routine. Yeah, I actually did launch it twice. That is So weird. Okay, we have some basic behaviors on the collision checking. We walk through all the enemies, we ask if they're colliding with a player, call them both and let them know what's happened. What is check game over? It needs to be something like if player Ulf, come on. If player health, that's private, I knew that was a mistake, is less than 0. Do game over stuff, right? What would that be? We could set is running to false, but I don't think that's what we want. Because is running is handling our thread's lifetime. And this is gameplay, but not the thread. We want to maybe enter a high score, maybe we want to show some effects. We want the game to keep running, but the player is dead. So like gameplay has ended, but the application isn't done yet. Do I want to add... We should probably have an is game over for the logic. And in this case, it is true. And that's all we can do at the moment. We don't have text rendering or any way of giving feedback. Is game over is false by default. I bring that up so we can declare that in the constructor, in the, game class. Is game over is false by default. And then we can decide later on how we want to handle that. Should we do... We can do a quick and dirty thing. So if is game over, return. So this is at the very top of update, right? If the game is over, don't do any more processing. And we need to make player health public, or at least not private. So I'm gonna do it like that. We probably also need a restart or respawn or something for the player so it can reset itself, but we start here. And now that's the recording. I want the emulator. 1, 2, 3, and everything stops. Okay. Other than that, what do we need? We might want to have, sound effects. It's very difficult for the player to interpret what's happening if you're not telling them what's happening. We really have to provide player feedback on every important gameplay event. And collisions, especially when we're reducing health on the player, tends to be very, very important. So sound effects, maybe particle effects, anything to demonstrate, to show visually and audioly, that's not a word, but whatever, that something important has happened. One thing we could do is, for example, the player could set a flag. Like, last time we were hit, or a counter. And then for as long as that counter hasn't reached 0, in our render function, you could change the color of the player. So you could have it by changing the paint object. You can do paint alpha, for example, to play with transparency. You can set different colors to have a tint to the bitmap. So you can have visual effects. Ask the paint object, like go to the documentation and do some reading. There is tons of features on the paint object that lets you adjust how you render this bitmap. And so you can set a flag on your on collision that applies while rendering for a while afterwards, so that the player sees that this happened and maybe it has an ongoing consequence. In many games, you used to have what's called grace frames. So once you've taken damage, you are invulnerable for maybe a second or half a second. And that's also important gameplay to communicate, right? So you want that rule, that effect, to be very clear and visible. And in old games, that would be that you'd let the player blink, for example. Or in this case, you could use the paint object and adjust the alpha. All kinds of simple tricks you can do to communicate with the player. We are not going to do that right now. I'm going to add that to your assignment in case you want to polish this game and make it better and clearer and more impressive. I encourage you to play around with that stuff and make it so. Okay, so that was collision detection. Next up, I think we're gonna need a goal of some kind. So we should probably have a score system, get this towards the finishing line. See you in the next video.